Assalamualaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. I welcome you all to this roundtable discussion on perspectives of national security, arranged by Center for Law and Security. As you all know, Pakistan ने recently जो है वो अपनी first ever नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी जो है वो लॉन्च की है और इसका एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट जो है वो इस पॉलिसी लॉन्च का ये है कि मच ऑफ इट इज़ अ पब्लिक डॉक्यूमेंट. सो जब आप किसी को पब्लिक डॉक्यूमेंट जो है वो किसी चीज़ को करते हैं तो देन यू ऑल्सो गिव पीपल ऑफ पाकिस्तान एंड गिव एनालिस्ट एंड थिंक टैंक्स अ चांस टू इवेलुएट कि वो पॉलिसी जो है वो क्या है, इसमें अच्छा क्या है, इसके अंदर जो है वो बुरा क्या है. एंड दैट इज़ वाई वी आर हेयर. इट्स अ वेरी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव डॉक्यूमेंट इफ़ यू टेक अ लुक, क्योंकि इसके अंदर जो है वो जियो इकनॉमिक्स की भी बात है, इसके अंदर फॉरेन पॉलिसी की भी बात है, इसमें नॉन ट्रेडिशनल सिक्योरिटी एलिमेंट्स की बात है, इसमें इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी की बात है. द पॉइंट इज़ कि पाकिस्तान की जो नेशनल सिक्योरिटी है, इट इज़ द की, इट इज़ द फल्क्रम, और उसको सेटिंग इट इन द राइट डायरेक्शन इज़ द की. सो दैट्स वाई वी हैव अरेंज दिस राउंड टेबल जो है वो कि इस नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी के ऊपर एक डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव्स जो हैं वो क्या हैं. हमारे जो आज के जो पैनलिस्ट हैं हु विल बी स्पीकिंग एट दिस राउंड टेबल, दे कम फ्रॉम अ वैरायटी ऑफ बैकग्राउंड. सो वी हैव ट्राइड के सेंटर फॉर लॉ एंड सिक्योरिटी जो है वो डिफरेंट जो नैरेटिव्स हैं नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के ऊपर और इसके जो डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट्स हैं उनको जो है वो एवेलुएट कर सके. ऑल्सो लेट मी जस्ट ब्रीफली टेल यू अबाउट सेंटर फॉर लॉ एंड सिक्योरिटी एज वेल. अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल नो दिस ऑलरेडी जो यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं, स्पेशली विद द ऑडियंस, बट फॉर द पैनलिस्ट आई रियली वांट टू पुट इट out. Center for Law and Security has been working on issues that come at the intersection of law and national security. That also includes policy making as well. बहुत सारे issues ऐसे हैं जो law और national security को intersect करते हैं. For example, lawfare है, कश्मीर है, अफ़गानिस्तान है, then there is environment security, there is energy security, and all these securities have a legal angle attached to it. So center also focuses on matters of national security, but it also has a legal lens that we use to analyze these issues. So आज की भी जो ये national security policy पे perspectives पर राउंड टेबल अरेंज करने का मकसद यही है कि हम इसको इसकी एक एवेल्यूएशन कर सकें फ्रॉम द लेंस ऑफ नेशनल सिक्योरिटी एंड ऑल्सो फ्रॉम द लेंस ऑफ हाउ पॉलिसी मेकिंग इज़ बीइंग डन एंड व्हाट इज़ द फ्यूचर ऑफ दिस नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी इन पाकिस्तान. क्योंकि इस पर बहुत बात हो रही है, इसकी न्यूनेस पे बात हो रही है, कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवनेस पे बात हो रही है. सम पीपल आर कॉलिंग इट अ नोवेल आइडिया, but then there are also questions being raised on its compatibility with our ground realities. तो ये जो है वो सारी थीम्स हैं जिनको आज की इस डिस्कशन में, इस राउंड टेबल में हम साथ लेके चलेंगे. मैं बिफोर आई इंट्रोड्यूस टुडेज पैनलिस्ट, फॉर्मेट थोड़ा सा मैं बता देता हूँ आज की इस डिस्कशन का. सो it's a round table discussion. Initially we'll pass it on to every panelist जो कि अपने अपने area of expertise को जो है वो उसमें जो है वो national security policy की अपनी जो evaluation है, इसकी future direction, इसकी जो है वो whether it is implementable or not, उसको evaluate करेंगे. And then we will have a Q&A session towards the end, जिसमें जो है वो आप जितने भी यहाँ पर लोग हैं उनसे जो है वो क्वेश्चन आंसर कर सकते हैं. सो फर्स्ट इनिशियल फॉर इनिशियल कमेंट्स फॉर पैनलिस्ट, सो देयर आर 10 to 15 minutes फॉर ईच स्पीकर and then we will move towards a question answer session. So मैं आज का जो एरियाज़ हैं जो पैनलिस्ट हैं उनका इंट्रोडक्शन करा देता हूँ, और जो एरिया वो इस नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी का एवेलुएट करेंगे, जिस पे अपना पर्सपेक्टिव देंगे, वो भी बता देता हूँ. इट विल बी अ बायलिंगुअल, सो प्लीज़ फील फ्री अगर आप इंग्लिश में बात करना चाहते हैं या उर्दू में बात करना चाहते हैं. सो बट आई विल बी बायलिंगुअल फॉर द रीज़न बिकॉज हम चाहते हैं कि ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा जो है वो ऑडियंस, बिकॉज दिस विल ऑल्सो गो ऑन यूट्यूब एंड सोशल मीडिया प्लेटफॉर्म्स, डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म्स. तो हम चाहते हैं कि ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोग जो है वो इसको इस डिस्कशन को जो है वो दे कुड अंडरस्टैंड इट एंड दे कैन ऑल्सो लर्न फ्रॉम इट. So we have Dr. Usman Chauhan with us. Dr. Usman Chauhan is an international economist and academic who served as the Director of Economic Affairs and National Development at CLAS. He is among the top 10 business authors on the Social Science Research Network, which is the largest open repository of knowledge in the world. Academics mein, his research has been cited widely, as for the example World Trade Organization, European Parliament, National Bureau of Economic Research and OECD among many others. Dr. Saab, thank you so much for your time. Dr. Saab का जो एरिया है वो जियो इकोनॉमिक्स होगा, जो ख़ास तौर पर इस पॉलिसी के अंदर जो है, क्योंकि ये बात बहुत ज़्यादा की गई है कि हाउ इकोनॉमी हैज़ बिकम अ न्यू पिलर ऑफ नेशनल सिक्योरिटी, तो इस पे जो है वो वी वुड लव टू हेयर फ्रॉम डॉक्टर उस्मान साहब. वी हैव एजाज अहमद चौधरी विद अस. एजाज चौधरी साहब नीड्स नो इंट्रोडक्शन. ही सर्व्ड एज अ फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी ऑफ पाकिस्तान फॉर ओवर 3 years. जो है वो participated actively in high level foreign policy discussions. December Chaudhry Saab's last diplomatic assignment was ambassador of Pakistan to the United States, where he actively engaged the US legislators. He has been lecturing extensively on matters of national security. He runs a think tank as well. एजाज चौधरी साहब जो है वो आपको टीवी पे भी नज़र आते हैं, हर जगह पे नज़र आते हैं. ही इज़ बिन वेरी काइंड, वेरी ग्रेशियस. ही इज़ इन लाहौर बट ही हैज़ स्टिल टेकन टाइम आउट फॉर अस. सो एजाज चौधरी साहब, थैंक यू सो मच. एजाज चौधरी साहब विल बी टेकिंग अ लुक एट द आर जो फॉरेन अफेयर्स हैं, फॉरेन रिलेशंस, क्योंकि बहुत ज़्यादा बात हो रही है कि पाकिस्तान विल नॉट बी जॉइनिंग एनी कैंप. सो आई वुड लव टू हेयर हिज थॉट्स ऑन हाउ पाकिस्तान कैन डू दैट. सो थैंक यू सो मच Azaz Chaudhry Sahab. We have Ambassador Seema Alai Baloch Sahaba. Seema Alai Baloch Sahaba is a career diplomat, wide-ranging experience in foreign service of Pakistan. She has represented Pakistan at several international forums during her postings abroad while working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where she has engaged in national and international government policy analysis. Her areas, particularly economics and politics, coordination between national and international agencies, bilateral and multilateral negotiations, and also administrative and financial management. Ambassador Sahiba will be focusing on the non-traditional elements of security. There's a lot of talk in policy about how human security, population, and all these matters, ये जो non-traditional elements हैं, they connect with national security of Pakistan. So Ambassador Sahiba, Excellency, thank you so much for your time. We would love to hear your thoughts on non-traditional elements. We will also be joined by Shehzad Chaudhry Sahab. Shehzad Chaudhry Sahab is a defense analyst. He also writes on politics and security. His area of expertise include contemporary history, defense security strategy. इनका जो फोकस है वो यूएस, साउथ एशिया के ऊपर भी जो है वो ख़ास तौर पर है. सो एयर वाइस मार्शल शहजाद चौधरी साहब विल बी जॉइनिंग अस. थैंक यू सो मच फॉर हिज टाइम इन एडवांस. Lastly we have Saqib Sultan Saab with us. Saqib Sultan Saab currently serves with as the DIG, Deputy Inspector General at the National Police Bureau. National Police Bureau, ये मुझे अभी बता रहे थे कि it's handles all the जो पुलिस की जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं उनको जो है वो देखती है. ही हैज़ अ वाइड रेंजिंग एक्सपीरियंस इन मैटर्स ऑफ इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी. वी वुड लव टू हेयर योर थॉट्स ऑन मैटर्स ऑफ इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी एंड हाउ दिस नेशनल सिक्योरिटी, इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी एंड पुलिसिंग स्पेशली is linked to national security of Pakistan. So thank you so much everyone. We will be starting this discussion. मैं format पहले से explain जो है वो कर चुका हूँ. So with your permission, with all the panelists, we will be starting with Azaz Chaudhry Sahab.
First a few words about the policy, the national security policy. I am one of those, Rahman Sahib, who believe that this policy, introduction of this policy was a good idea. कुछ लोग कहते हैं जी इसमें तो कोई खास बात नहीं, but I feel that even if it is just a statement of good intentions, it was needed. This was a gap. तमाम दुनिया की जो powers हैं, they always come up with some kind of policy pronouncement. और कई बार वो बड़ी far reaching होती हैं pronouncements. दुनिया उससे सीखती है. I give you an example. December 2017 में यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ने एक अपनी नेशनल इम्पोर्टेंट कि हमें ये कहना चाहिए था और हमें ये कह दिया उन्होंने और बहुत अच्छा किया. और उसमें उन्होंने ये क्लियर कह दिया कि वो तो ठीक है लेकिन जो थ्रेट पाकिस्तान की थ्रेट परसेप्शन है, अगर आप उसको गौर करें तो पहले तो वो वाकई बॉर्डर्स पे थी, लेकिन वो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता थ्रेट्स हैव स्टार्टेड इमर्जिंग फ्रॉम विदिन, not just from outside. And इसलिए it was important that we look at the ये जो अभी जिस पे आपने नॉन ट्रेडिशनल थ्रेट्स की आप अभी सीमा इलाही उस पे बात करेंगी, तो नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी ये बता हमारी हिफाजत की का नहीं है, क्लाइमेट चेंजेस जिस तरह आती हैं, फ्लैश फ्लड्स, डिजीजेस जो आती हैं, या नेचुरल डिजास्टर्स हैं, टूरिज्म है, टेररिज्म है, वायलेंट एक्सट्रीमिज्म है, डिसइंफॉर्मेशन कैंपेन्स हैं, इकोनॉमिक है, पॉपुलेशन इतनी फैल रही, इसको कैसे मैनेज करेगी, है लॉफेयर, किस तरीके से लॉ हैज बीन यूज्ड टू अंडरमाइन द नेशनल सिक्योरिटी ऑफ कंट्री। तो ये सारी बातें ये बता रही है कि कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव ही होनी चाहिए, तो भी ब्रॉड बेस्ड होना चाहिए, तो उस लिहाज से इट इज ए गुड आइडिया। एक तीसरी चीज जो मुझे इसकी बहुत पसंद आई है वो ये है कि ये सिटीजन स्ट्रैटेजी हमारा अल्टीमेट पर्पस होगा कि सेफ्टी, सिक्योरिटी, डिग्निटी एंड प्रॉस्पेरिटी ऑफ सिटीजन। अच्छा, इस पे भी आप कह सकते हैं कि ये कोई नई बात नहीं है, बिल्कुल नई बात है, क्योंकि जो सिटीजन सेंट्रिक अप्रोच है वो हमने लिप सर्विस हमने इसको फॉलो नहीं किया, और इसीलिए इन्होंने नया कॉन्सेप्ट दिया है कि ट्राइपॉड बनेगा विद इकोनॉमिक सिक्योरिटी एट इट्स कोर। तो ये दो चीजें, सिटीजन सेंट्रिक अप्रोच और इकोनॉमिक सिक्योरिटी एट द कोर will be able to change our perspective of how we look at the security of our nation and our nationals. तो वो तो ये स्टेटमेंट, ये पूरा का पूरा जो है वो बहुत अच्छा लगा। दूसरा सॉरी फाइनली इस चीज में सिर्फ एक कमेंट दे दूं, फिर मैं आता हूँ फॉरेन पॉलिसी वाले पे। एक कमेंट ये है कि ये जो चीज पे मुझे मिसिंग लगी, और मैंने ये डॉन के आर्टिकल में भी लिखा, जो मुझे लिखी मिसिंग लगी वो था इम्प्लीमेंटेशन फ्रेमवर्क। तो मैंने वहां पे नेशनल सिक्योरिटी सवाल किया कि जितनी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव ब्रॉड बेस्ड आपने नेशनल सिक्योरिटी स्ट्रेटजी बनाई है, उतना ही ब्रॉड बेस्ड एंड कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव इम्प्लीमेंटेशन फ्रेमवर्क भी चाहिए होगा। तो क्या ये सेक्टोरल और डिपार्टमेंटल और एजेंसी implementation matrices जो बनेंगे and aligned to this national security objectives or not, and how do we make sure that there will be oversight and accountability and a follow up of that. I was told कि जो classified part है इस national security policy का, that will take care of this particular aspect. Well, we are there to see. Another gap that I did see in this was that there was a need for a wider political consensus on this stuff. I noticed that this was not discussed in the parliament or in various sometimes the political parties conferences are arranged. I believe that this should have also been taken there, but now I see that in some of the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee and National Foreign Affairs Committee, I think National Security Advisor has spoken about it, which is a good beginning. But in order for it to be completely successful, there should be a nationwide political consensus. So ये तो मेरे कुछ जनरल कमेंट्स थे इसके ऊपर, रहमान नजर साहब। अब आपने जो टॉपिक मुझे दिया, चूंकि टाइम हमारे पास 10 से 15 मिनट है, इसलिए आई विल बी वेरी कंसाइज एंड। अब अगर आपने इस डॉक्यूमेंट के इस वक्त हाथ में है ये डॉक्यूमेंट, तो व्हेन आई लुक एट दिस डॉक्यूमेंट आई सी कि उन्होंने हमें पॉलिसी ऑब्जेक्टिव फॉरेन पॉलिसी के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ये दिया हुआ है कि कल्टीवेट ब्रॉड बेस्ड रिलेशनशिप्स विद ग्लोबल पावर्स थ्रू प्रोएक्टिव, pragmatic and unapologetic approach on shared convergence on strategic and economic interests. अब इसका मतलब ये है कि हमने अपने नेशनल इंटरेस्ट के मुताबिक पॉलिसी डिटरमिन करनी है, और देखना है कि किस रिलेशनशिप से हमें क्या मिल रहा है। एंड दैट इज व्हाई ये जो मेजर पावर कंपटीशन जब से शुरू हुआ है पाकिस्तान में, दो और चल पड़े। एक स्कूल ऑफ थॉट ये कहता है कि चाइना के साथ हमारे इंटरेस्ट वाबस्ता है, चाइना हमारे साथ हमेशा से अच्छा दोस्त रहा है, चाइना के ने हमारी सॉवरेनिटी की रिस्पेक्ट की है, चाइना हैज बीन रिस्पेक्टफुल ऑफ आवर position, has been supportive of our position at all international forum, and so has Pakistan respected the red lines of China and core interests of China have been supported. And therefore, it is time for us to move into the Chinese camp so that we maximize. People also argue that United States is an unreliable partner, that United States has dished us many times, and that United States has joined India in its broader objective, and therefore there is no scope for Pakistan to join United States. This is one line of thought that has been mentioned, but I want to tell you, Rehman Azhar Saab, I do not agree with this line of thought. I believe the United States is a country with which we have had long, sustained periods of relationships. I believe the United States has been, this relationship has been beneficial to Pakistan on many occasions. Yes, there have been side effects, but on the whole, I believe that the United States still is in a position to benefit Pakistan. But at the same time, if we get into this camps business, then there will be huge costs to us. If we go to the American camp, there will be costs vis-a-vis China. If we go to the Chinese camps, there will be costs with respect to United States. And therefore, I believe Pakistan should maintain relationship both with China and with United States. As far as I understand, the Chinese also want us to maintain this balanced relationship with both powers. In fact, all major power including. And therefore, it makes perfect sense to me that we should go for a balanced approach as stated in the national security policy towards all major powers. I also believe कि अभी कैंप्स बने नहीं हैं। अभी देखिए ना, अभी तो मेजर पावर कंपटीशन तो हो रहा है, लेकिन एट द सेम टाइम आप ये देखें कि चाइना और यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स की ट्रेड 2020 में $550 थी, बिलियन डॉलर थी, और वो बढ़कर 2021 में $650 बिलियन हो गए। एक्सक्यूज मी, ये कंपटीशन जो है ये डिफरेंट नेचर का है, ये यूएस सोवियत यूनियन वाला नहीं है ये कंपटीशन। और इसी तरीके से चाइना होल्ड्स ओवर $1 ट्रिलियन वर्थ ऑफ यूएस ट्रेजरी बॉन्ड, एंड इस वजह से आप आजकल की जो दुनिया है इसमें कॉन्फ्लिक्ट, फ्रिक्शन एंड कोऑपरेशन आर कोएग्जिस्टिंग। तो ये हमारी फॉली होगी कि हम ये समझें कि दुनिया कैंप्स में बन गई है, बट गई है, और भाग के किसी कैंप में शामिल हो। बिल्कुल हमें ये इस किस्म की कोई जल्दी नहीं करनी चाहिए। We should take it out, and I tell you from every relationship, जब आप कहते हैं कि हम इकोनॉमिक सिक्योरिटी करेंगे, तो फिर इसका मतलब ये है कि आप हर रिलेशनशिप से अपने इकोनॉमिक बेनिफिट्स देखेंगे, और ताकि पाकिस्तान जो है वो बने। और वन फाइनल पॉइंट फॉर आई क्लोज, एक तो ये कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर इकोनॉमिक सिक्योरिटी उस वक्त आएगी जब पाकिस्तान की इंटरनल जो भी आपने करना है वो तो आप करेंगे, ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस एंड व्हाटएवर यू वांट, एंड इकोनॉमिक स्टेक्स ऑफ आउटसाइड पावर्स इन योर कंट्री, एवरी आउटसाइड पावर। अभी प्राइम मिनिस्टर रशिया का प्लान बन रहा है, रशिया के इकोनॉमिक स्टेक्स बनाए, इसमें वो नॉर्थ साउथ गैस स्ट्रीम है। आप क्या अमेरिका के इकोनॉमिक स्टेक्स बनाए, अमेरिका ऑलरेडी is the destination, the largest destination of our export. चीन का बड़ा अच्छा दौरा हुआ है, चीन के स्टेट्स इंशाल्लाह और ज्यादा बढ़ेंगे, बहुत अच्छा दौरा गया है, उसमें बड़ी नई बातें आई, और स्पेशली फ्रेमवर्क फॉर इंडस्ट्रियल कोऑपरेशन आई एम वेरी एक्साइटेड अबाउट। मेरे ख्याल में उससे एक नई पाकिस्तान की इकोनॉमिक सिक्योरिटी में एक नई जहद खुलेगी। तो मेरी ये कुछ चंद एक लवाजमात है, मेरा ख्याल में नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी ने सही डायरेक्शन शो की हैं। आई बिलीव वी शुड मोबिलाइज political consensus in implementation of this direction for the larger benefit of your and my country. Democracy summit में नहीं गया तो अमेरिका नाराज हो गया, पाकिस्तान अगर विंटर ओलंपिक्स में गया तो चीन खुश हो गया, अमेरिका नाराज हो गया। देखिए ऐसा नहीं है, मैंने वहां पे ऐसे एनालिसिस नहीं देखे थे कि हमारे अपने अंदर ही है कि हम आने वाले खतरों को खींच तान के अपने ऊपर ठान लिया। ये बात ये है कि सारी दुनिया ये समझती है कि अगर आप अपने नेशनल इंटरेस्ट को फॉलो कर रहे हैं, the world will understand. Believe you me, if you follow your national interest, I'll give you a very concrete example, Rahman Azhar. I'll give you an example. जब 2015 में सऊदी अरेबिया ने 26 अप्रैल 2015 को मिलिट्री स्ट्राइक्स शुरू की अगेंस्ट यमन, तो उन्होंने हमें कहा कि आप शामिल हो जाइए, और उनका ख्याल था कि हम तो दोस्त हैं उनके, तो वहाँ पे फौरन आ जाना चाहिए। लेकिन हमारा पार्लियामेंट ने हमारी कह दिया कि भाई आप तो न्यूट्रल रहेंगे। शुरू में बड़ा शोर गोगो हुआ, सऊदी अरब से भी, यूएई से भी, लेकिन क्या हुआ? एवरी कंट्री केम टू दिस। व्हेन यू परस्यू योर नेशनल इंटरेस्ट, जो आप कहते हैं ना ग्राउंड रियलिटी आपका नेशनल इंटरेस्ट है सर। अगर आप इस ग्राउंड रियलिटी को आप अपीजमेंट ना करें, आप किसी को ऑफेंड भी ना करें, just follow your national interest in all honesty, explain it to your friends and to your foes, and you will see that they will come to respect you.
All right.
I don't honestly see any contradiction between the avowed goals and between the ground reality.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Geoeconomics and economics has a disproportionate role in the national security policy. It's actually situated at the core, which puts a big onus on economists to think about how they can contextualize the national security policy and how to attain the goals that are stipulated in it. I agree with Sir Azaz that it is a welcome initiative, because every country has to express itself and share its vision with its own people, as well as signal to the world where it wants to go. There are three major elements. I'm not talking specifically about Section 4, but looking at the entirety of economics as it is situated in the policy. One thing is economic security and sovereignty. The second is geoeconomics, and the third is human security, which Ma'am Seema will cover in more detail, but the crossover between what is economic and what is human, and how to distinguish and should you distinguish. So keep in mind that what you see in this policy is just an abridged version. The actual document is more substantial, and the economics is also more substantial because it provides more concrete guidelines. So that is not for public consumption though, so what you gain is sort of a cursory glance of economics given so much importance. Okay? So the first thing that one should commend is the forward-looking nature of the policy insofar as economics is concerned, in two ways. The first is connectivity, and the second is knowing the nature and the structure of the economy in the 21st century. So the digital economy, those sorts of things are given due weight. If this was a very 20th century oriented document, I wouldn't take it seriously, right? So the fact that it's forward-looking in those sense is good. But we have to deconstruct some elements in it now. Economic security and sovereignty, as stipulated there, and in Mueyyid Yusuf's understanding, has a very limited meaning as opposed to what somebody who is an economic historian would tell you. His idea of being economically secure is the Mahathir style, which is that you have enough reserves that you can withstand shocks and you're resilient. That is the idea. That is the most important thing. For example, one place where I see a big difference between Pakistan and India is in the foreign reserves. We are max 30 billion on a lucky day. They are 600 billion. Russia is also 600 billion. China is several trillions now of the total. In that way, they do dwarf us, and that's why focusing on this is important. But how do we get those reserves, and at what price? You see, you could have $1 trillion in Pakistan tomorrow, but you would have to pay $2 trillion in interest for it the next day. That is the problem. So the cost, money itself has a cost. And so how do you earn it? that needs to be considered, not specifically in this policy, but how does it translate into ministerial initiatives, including the central bank and departments. So this context of security just being resilience through reserves, it is important, but it's not the full story. That is left out substantially. The second, which I think speaks to your ambit, Rahman Saab, as well as everybody here, is law, specifically economic justice. Now, when we look at this policy, it sort of skims over the justice system. But if you ask me, the one pillar of Pakistan that needs to be really getting its act together is the justice system, for economics specifically. But if you ask the judges, they'll say, for example, Punjab mein 2200 judges hain. If you really extend the definition of judge, 2200 afraad, 11 crore afraad ko insaf dilayenge? That is the problem. So the scope of what they can do is also limited. So the justice system, insofar as it furthers, how does it further it? The protection of property rights, contract enforcement, ease of doing business, redress to various parties. Justice is a very big part, and that is basically the crux of the Islamic understanding of the economy as well, is justice, basically. It is so crucial. The justice system isn't covered enough. But when you ask them, they don't want to, you see, because we have so many pillars of power in Pakistan, too many chiefs, not enough Indians, nobody wants to step on the judge's toes either. I, as a free citizen, will say, well, they should do more about this, but... Okay, the next point is about human security. So, the funny thing in the debates, it's not so much the policy, but the debates of interpretation of this policy, is that जब भी economics की बात होती है, तो human security के solutions होते हैं, और जब भी human security की बात होती है, तो economic solutions होते हैं. So are they really two different ideas? I mean, if you're empowering your citizens economically, have you solved an economics problem or a human security problem? You've done both. So you have to think about what is the boundary between what is human security and economics. I'll give you two examples, but this is not part of the policy, but this is for you to think about. What is something that is economic security, but not necessarily human security? One example that comes to mind is the reserves ratio of the banks. मैं मर नहीं जाऊंगा अगर वो 10 से 12% हो जाए, but in terms of economic security and financial stability, it does matter. What is human security, but it is not economic security, is the trust that you have in your mohalledar. You cannot put a price कि मेरा जो हमसाया है वो decent है और वो बचा लेगा मुझे. You cannot put a price on that, but that is your human security. That trust in society. There's no price, but it's very valuable. So we have to conceptualize these things with more clarity in our discussions. The policy doesn't need to do that. The detailed version also doesn't need to do that, but we need to do that. Now, the crux of the term that is popularized as a mantra is geoeconomics. That also has a very specific interpretation, which is connectivity in the immediate, the near abroad and the far abroad. And instruments such as CPEC are seen as crucial to that. This is very logical. Now we have to, in terms of executing that, ask what is good for us and what is good for China and what is good for both of us. The way our deals were negotiated in CPEC, we could have asked for more. We really could have, but we didn't. And the Chinese are willing to give us everything because, in fact, there is more at stake for China than for us. Right? Because they have to show the world that their model can be given to the world, otherwise they're just an idiosyncratic case. So geoeconomics makes perfect sense, but there's two big barriers to getting it done. And other parts of the security policy deal with it. I just want to integrate it in your mind, which is Afghanistan. If you have peace in Afghanistan, then you go towards the northwest entirely. That's very important that Afghanistan is stable, but that's not entirely in our hand, and I think we do plenty for our Afghan neighbors. We're very fraternal in our outlook towards them. The question is, how fraternal are they? And on the other side, India. Now, trade with India is, not the center of this, but there are debates about whether we should and shouldn't. My personal view is you have to look at the economic merits of trading with India. If you study the nature of trade that happened in the beginning of the 21st century, so let's say 2002 till before Modi came, it was not a good deal for Pakistan, for two reasons specifically. One is the non-tariff or non-trade barriers. They'll say, "Arey Pakistan aaye na, hum aapka swagat karte hain." And then they say, "Arey Pakistani ke saath kuch nahi karna tumne samjhota." This is the problem. That is not written anywhere, but they don't buy from you. They push their things into your markets. And the second thing is that, how should we say this? The trade complementarity. You can address 18% of their requirements because they have there's two Indias. There's a very 21st century India and then there's the 21st century BC India. It's so backward. Now, the trade complexity is growing because this is becoming larger. So you cannot address all of their needs. You don't produce these things. But they can address 70% of your import requirements.
All right.
So trade complementarity is very one way. So you just incur massive deficits, and you already run two types of deficits, current account and fiscal account. Yes, you would tax more, so your fiscal might remedy slightly, but your current account would be devastated, right? Because they would just flood you with tomatoes and that. And it would also destroy your industry. So you have to consider the nature of this. The geoeconomics as it's envisioned is noble, but आपका बुनियादी सवाल हर एक speaker से हुआ कि the realities on the ground. तो उसके बरअक्स में ये सारी गुजारिशात कर रहा हूँ. And one thing is that the National Security Advisor, for all his good intent, has put something at the crux of the policy for which he is not a subject matter expert. Mueed Yusuf does not have a profound grasp of economics, but that's why we are here, to help him, of course. But for somebody who's so passionate about geography, I really wanted to read up more on this. But who has the time? Mueed Yusuf literally works till 3 in the morning and then is at the office at 7. So it's a tough job he has, so we have to give him a complete credit. And finally, on the implementation point, before I run out of time, each of these things get passed on to different ministries, and the ministries have to be in sync. There has to be a coordination among them to achieve geoeconomic goals. But at the same time that we are purporting and propagating a geoeconomic vision, we are also relinquishing the instruments by which it's to be achieved. For example, this SBP Amendment Act is as it stands, as it has been passed by the Senate on one vote, it is the central bank is Madar Pedar Azad. So I will tell you that Dar Pakistan, Madar Pedar Azad, Darkar Neist, right? We just really need to, and we have a fiscal monetary coordination board, and it's very imperfect. There are many problems in terms of our fiscal and monetary arm, and if you don't have sincere governments, then they will use both arms to exploit the people. But if you have a compassionate government, then it would use both arms to push. Give you one example. In COVID-19, Pakistan has had a stellar performance, not just on the public health, but also in economics, because there was extreme coordination. So the State Bank governor, you cannot thank him enough for the way that he was counter-cyclical and strategic in helping specific industries. And so we basically cruise through the hell of COVID-19 as an economy. It's incredible. That's because there's coordination. Now you won't have that. Now the State Bank governor has one mandate, which is price stability. But price stability doesn't apply to Pakistan because the nature of inflation in Pakistan is कि चीज़ें फियाज़ हैं, चीनी नहीं आ रही, those sorts of like supply side issues. It's not that we are so rich that we're outbidding each other in the market. It's not happened. This is not demand pull, it's cost push. So their one specific mandate they don't have the tools to grapple with that. It's not the nature of the economy. But in countries that have pursued geoeconomics, central banks have been crucial. Name a country that has pursued geoeconomics seriously in the 20th century. The example that comes most vividly to mind, because I've studied it deeply, is Japan. They're very serious about this. So how did they structure it? There's the Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Finance in Japan, ye basically majazi khuda hota hai. Under the emperor is the Ministry of Finance, and beneath them is the Bank of Japan, the central bank. And they had specific tools to assist specific industries to attain specific ends. For example, they have window guidance. Window guidance says, okay, we will help these industries for this time at these rates, and so they push them. That is the level of coordination. Why did Japan's economy plateau after 1989? Because the central bank took its own ideological initiative to supersede the Ministry of Finance. They did it, and so they engineered a bubble that would make the Japanese people think the Ministry of Finance is incompetent so that they can take that space. They have taken that space, but Japan has not continued that trajectory. It could have. That is how important central banks can be, depending on the agenda that they pursue. In Pakistan, the idea is you shouldn't have an agenda to pursue. But now they will have an agenda to pursue. So this is not compatible with geoeconomics, is my point. So the reality on the ground, the implementation, the tools we have to keep these in mind while we look at the nobility of the importance that is accorded to geoeconomics and economic sovereignty.
So, if I may ask a follow-up question, since you mentioned State Bank Autonomy Bill, हमारा बड़ा focus रहा है. We have talked about CPEC as well. We pitch it as a Chinese stake linked with our national security, $46 billion investment. But again, going back to the ground reality, we have seen one episode with what IMF can do with Pakistan, or with US bloc can do with Pakistan national sovereignty or security. with just $1 billion tranche they were supposed to get. This policy states that economic policies will be in line for 6 years, and economic policy will also come in line with this policy document. So now, on a policy framework level, is it possible with these sporadic episodes where we need money, where sometimes we have good relations with China, there is a visit and then things improve, or let's say Army Chief goes to America, they get to talk to each other, and then suddenly there's some easement as well, Prime Minister goes to US. So with this fluctuation, how viable is this economic policy and this national security policy document, or its section 4?
And this is a very deep question, because you're asking, is this policy like our economy cyclical or is it structural? The answer is that the policy's spirit is structural, because it says that you really have to align along these lines for, yes, 6 years, but this is really what the mid-20th century should look like for us. But given the reality of cyclicality, in which we are also paying a price for previous eras, previous governments and previous policies, they accumulate. For example, the debt that you're paying right now was borrowed 15 years ago. And the debt that you are taking now has to be paid 15 years down when you will be working. So there is a contingency and path dependency which makes it harder and harder. So the earlier that we make interventions, we're 70 years late, 75 years late, but the earlier we make interventions, the better. And our economy's structure is morphing, but given the wicked problems that we are dealing with as a society and as a global community, you should also ask if you want to project beyond 2050 anyways.
So next up is internal security. There is also a section on internal security that talks about policy guidelines, opportunities and challenges. So this is again one of the important pillars of our national security, and how internal security can be a stabilizing factor for our national security. For that, I'll hand it over to Saqib Sultan Sahib.
Thank you very much, sir. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It's a real privilege and pleasure being here amongst such noble audience and very well educated students as well as faculty. I come from the National Police Bureau, but not today in an official capacity. So I am here in my personal capacity, first of all. So whatever my comments would be in my personal capacity and will not be any official statement or version.
Your personal perspective.
Indeed, as a professional, as a police officer, in the light of my experience and knowledge, I would like to shed some light on the internal security policy, which is, just as I studied it, it is, I think, a very well drafted and a very well conceived document. Because I have been working in the field, serving for about 2 decades now, and most of which has been spent in the police field service. So I am pretty well aware of the challenges that we face in the field. And for the last 2 years, I am working as the director of National Police Bureau. And National Police Bureau is basically a think tank of police, which works on policies, reforms, capacity building, as well as we are the focal point, national focal point for different international covenants. We are the national focal point for coordination between 16 police organizations, mainly on reform measures and policy issues. We are the secretariat. We means National Police Bureau is the secretary of the National Police Management Board, and also the Secretariat of Police Reforms Committee. So having that experience for the last 2 years, having gone through most of the reform efforts, and actually these days, rather for the last 1 year, we are working on a very detailed agenda of police reforms at the National Police Bureau in collaboration and in coordination with all the police organizations, all the heads of police organizations, as well as members of the Police Reforms Committee, which actually is headed by the Honorable Chief Justice of Pakistan. And so this security policy, I would say, is very much needed, a very much needed document, although most of the, the spirit of the policy is already there, I would say, because having gone through the whole reforms process for the last 2 years, these are exactly the lines that police is working on. Just as you said in the beginning, how is this internal security policy related to police work? Obviously, it revolves around the police work, although it is not confined or limited to police. But the main stakeholders, or the main, I would say, executing agency for this policy is police. So let me just briefly spell out what the policy says about the national internal security. First of all, it gives us a vision of a stable and secure Pakistan, where citizens enjoy their constitutional rights and where rule of law exists, and which ensures equality before law. And that is actually, and what should be, the vision that we should be pursuing, and more or less we are already pursuing this vision. But it's good to have, always good to have a final document or a policy, a written policy, so that it reflects itself, or it is incorporated in all the policy decisions of the state, of the different organs of the state, and the executing agencies and the departments that are working to achieve this agenda. So the challenges identified by the internal security policy are terrorism, violent subnationalism, extremism and sectarianism, narcotics and organized crime. So these are the 4 main challenges, and I think very well defined, and these actually are the real challenges that we face in our society. As a citizen, I think so, and as a police officer, I agree with this categorization of threats and challenges that we face. These are the major issues. And of course, if we could also add, or I mean, it is already, I think, included, the radicalization, basically.
Sectarianism.
Yes, that's the radicalization of any kind, actually, is a major issue. And then the policy guidelines that this policy gives us, there are 2 main policy guidelines. Number 1, securing Pakistan internally, and for which we have to combat all the 4 challenges that have been identified by the report. And obviously, to address these challenges, the security policy, to address terrorism, it says that the government will follow a development approach towards the areas which are affected. It will also, engage with them with dialogue, and then strengthening of police forces and the counter-terrorism agencies, intelligence-based operations, preventing terror financing, addressing structural deficiencies and sense of deprivation in recruitment areas, and promoting pluralistic anti-terror narrative. So these are the major, policy guidelines which have been provided to overcome or to address this challenge. Then for violent subnationalism, again the policy of engagement, separating the reconcilables with the non-reconcilables, then cutting off the recruitment, constricting financial resources, then pursuing targeted socio-economic policies to improve governance in affected regions. Then coming to the extremism and sectarianism, the policy says that it will inculcate interfaith and inter-sectarian harmony and sectarian and societal tolerance, and cooperation of religious scholars in order to de-radicalize the people, and to also run de-radicalization programs and promote united narrative against extremism, and action to be taken against hate material and speech. These are very specific steps and policies to be adopted. And about drug and organized crime, obviously it's a big menace, and it is not a lone crime. It has connections, the drugs and organized crime. a lot of connections, social, political, economic. It also has the same kind of impact. So the policy says that the action should be taken against organized crime and drugs, and to ensure a safe environment for business and investment and intellectual activity. So this was the first part. How do we secure a safe Pakistan? And the second part of the policy guidelines is the rule of law, which is, I think, again, the most important part, which is equitable and responsive justice system, a citizen-focused justice system, equality before law and impartiality of the system, and equal opportunities to all the citizens of Pakistan. Now, these, I think there can be nothing better, or there can be no better approach towards these issues that this security policy has adopted. And I think the linchpin, in my own personal view, obviously the capacity building of the law enforcement agencies and the counter-terror departments and strengthening of institutions is important, but the linchpin, the most important part is actually an equitable and responsive justice system, a citizen-focused justice system. And obviously this is something that cannot be achieved in a day. All the components of criminal justice system have to work in synergy to create a really equitable and responsive justice system. Unfortunately, we are lagging a bit behind in this regard. But let me give you the good news that we have not given up. The efforts are on, and maybe in another session or some other day, I can also tell you in detail about what efforts for reforming the criminal justice system are being made currently, and what could be its impact. So there are very serious efforts right at the Forums of Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan, which is headed by the Chief Justice of Pakistan, and all the High Court Chief Justices are also members of that forum. So it's a very, it's an apex body of the criminal justice system, and they are also on board. Then the National Police Management Board is on board, which is the apex body of police policy making. So we are currently following a very detailed agenda of police reforms, which actually includes all the...
There are two things that I want you to address, and to sum it up. One is about police reforms. Why we have been experimenting with police reform ever since 2002. There have been multiple efforts to reform it, but it looks like we keep going back and forth. We try to improvise and then we go back, but then we again try to improvise and then we go back again. So why is there no consensus, despite all the wonderful police officers, the policy makers that we have in Pakistan? They come from cadres who are very brilliant officers, but why these efforts have not been successful? And this is number one. And the second one is impact of 18th Amendment, where the police is a provincial subject. We have also talked about the national cohesion as well, how unity and national cohesion is also linked to this internal security as well. So we have seen center and provinces fighting over police officers, which is unprecedented anywhere else. So how do you think these two issues intersect with our vision of, or Pakistan, or state's vision of national security?
Well, I think it's a bit misconceived perception. After 2002, I mean, the major police reforms, chunk of police reforms came in 2002 as police order. After that, obviously, there was no major effort for police reforms or bringing up a new police law, and particularly after the 18th Amendment, the provinces adopted or framed their new laws. Some provinces kept the police order and made certain amendments to it. Certain provinces, they created altogether their new police laws.
All right.
And so at the provincial level, the police reforms effort continued, obviously at provincial levels, but I would say that on national level, for a long time, there was no concerted effort for national efforts for police reforms. Okay. But at provincial level, they were there. But let me just explain one more thing, that in the judgment of Supreme Court of Pakistan, it's February 2019, it was declared that policing is a concurrent subject. Sindh High Court, Sindh government's basically case was dismissed, and because they were in the favor that okay, it is not a concurrent subject. So Supreme Court actually declared it that it is a concurrent subject, and Federation can and may legislate on federal. So lastly, to wind it up, I think why there was a gap that no serious national effort could be made was because there was no uniform police law in the country. But now, very recently, and the debate is still on, that will be settled amongst the stakeholders. And now, for the last year and a half, I am a witness to it, that a serious national concerted effort of police reforms is in process.
That's very encouraging. And I'm delighted to be amongst students. I always find that that is the best place to convey your thoughts and your perspectives. So, but before I move on to the human security aspect, let me just say a couple of things on the overall document and how I took it. Right. It is certainly comprehensive, inclusive, has added new elements like the non-traditional security. But at the same time, I felt that it has a lot of lofty goals and no targets. Perhaps in the other document that has not been made public, the targets are there. But unfortunately, without targets, it becomes a lot of verbiage when you read it. And that is why it is being criticized by many people. And having said that, when targets are missing, the baseline is also missing. We don't talk about where we are today, whether it's economics or population or climate change. It does not give any figures at all, except in one section on energy security, that in 2030, 60% of our energy will come from renewables. Apart from that, there are really no figures in the document. And it would have been very nice to have put something there so that for the general reader, we know that this is where we are and this is where we want to get. We don't want to know the how right now. That's for ministries to do, etc. So that is my overall comment. One of the other things that I thought was very good, and what you talked about, the national cohesion part, because it says we are going to have a whole of nation approach, a whole of government approach. Now, what does that really mean? We need to really unpack it. If whole of government means better coordination amongst ministries, fine. Whole of nation means, what exactly does it mean? I'm not too clear, to be honest. That we are going to have more cohesion among different ethnicities and among different provinces, etc. And one thing that also it does not talk about, or maybe mentioned in one line, is the role of culture. And to me, that's very important to bring about national cohesion. We have kind of left it to the side. We have left it to our neighbors to come and fill that vacuum. In terms of whether it's music or anything else. And somehow the radicalization over the years of our society has not helped. I think in that sense, maybe the younger people will bear me out. Coke Studio is still doing a good job. They have brought to the fore some of the things that have been forgotten in our music, and now they're trying to introduce dance, which is good. Having said that, to me, it is, when they say that national security, at the core of it is economic security, what is the core of economic security? Here in this document, they say external imbalance, vertical security, and horizontal security, by which they mean that wealth should be distributed properly, and vertical security means there should be harmony among the provinces, or justice and how wealth is distributed among the provinces. But frankly, economic security, to me, the basic pillars are really what are mentioned both in internal security and human security. From internal security, what I would take is the terrorism, the extremism, the subnational, the violent subnationalism, and the narcotics, etc. That if you do not control this, there is no question of economic security. There will be no investments coming in. There will be flight of capital from the country. So where are we heading with all this? On the human security, there are four, for our audience, they're basically divided into 4 sections. One is population, climate and water, food security, and a great new addition is gender security. So that is a big step forward for the government to recognize that that is also an issue. And if I were to say that if you look at both internal and human, the basic foundation is population control. There have studies been done that if you do not control population, and especially in the 1970s when there was a lot of violence in some of these underdeveloped or developing countries, there was a great link between young, unemployed people and extremism, terrorism, violent acts, violent conflicts. So we cannot, similarly, a lot of, it is also linked to drug abuse. When drugs come in and there's a large youth and unemployed, they tend to turn to drugs, especially in the absence of other outlets. On population, it is very interesting that while we say, our official figures say we grow at a rate of 2.4% or something, but the unofficial figures are far more. Some say it's over 3%, which is the highest in the region. In our region, it's 1.2%. Why is it important? It's not just linked to what I said about internal security, it is directly linked to food security. And right now, the figures are very worrying. They say because of food inflation, food security has become an issue up to 40% in rural areas. And that is really unacceptable in many ways. COVID has spoiled it further, of course. And food security is again affected by 2 things. One is urbanization linked to population. 3% annually is being urbanized. Lands are being agricultural lands, which should be productive, which should give food, are being taken up to make housing societies because there are people, and we say that I think 30% of our youth is under 30s. And when they become adults, can you imagine what the situation will be like? The other very important aspect which combines population growth and food insecurity is stunting. And you must have heard about the World Bank report and other World Food Program reports. Some say 32.6%, and some say, the reason I'm giving these percentages is they're very high. If a low percentages, most of them range between 30 to 40%. If 40% of your youth or your children under 5 are stunted today, you are going to have a population of adults with low IQs and low productivity because it affects your productivity as well. Again, population linked to unemployment. While the government says it's 6%, PIDE gave a recent report, I think to the Senate Standing Committee, and they said it's at 16%. These are again very high figures. How it is linked to climate and water shortages. Obviously, it's so obvious that you don't even have to quote figures really. The water, the way it is linked to energy security. The more your population grows, the less you have. And it's actually the way we are going, it's 1 step forward and 2 steps backward. Right. Whatever GDP growth we achieve, we actually are losing because we keep stepping back. Now, why is it that we are not focusing on it? And one of what I've been reading and something that I was discussing with Rahman Azhar the other day, that the government is just not focusing on it. Some people say it's because of the fundamentalist mindset. The Maulvi, if I may call it that, do not want to go this way, and family planning is not allowed in Islam, etc. But we have 2 examples, and I would like to quote them. Iran and Bangladesh. In Iran, the Maulvis gave a fatwa that you cannot have a large family. And it is a country where young couples about to be married are actually given lessons on how to go about family planning. In Bangladesh, they made it community centered. You know, they would select a husband and wife from a village who were educated but also part of that village, and took them. They in fact went to the villages and trained them, because Bangladesh in 1971, when they got their independence from us, Mujibur Rahman said we have to control population. If we do not do that, we will be actually cannibalizing each other, because Bangladesh was growing at such a fast pace. Malthus said that in 1788, by the way, that if we do not control population, the earth cannot give us enough food. So where are we going to go with it? Why are we not focusing? Iran is a Muslim country. Bangladesh is a Muslim country, more Muslim perhaps in terms of many things than we are. But we must, if you're going to put this recommendation up, please make people focus on this aspect. I think I've covered most of poverty. Poverty again has gone up because of, it's very simple. The numbers will keep going up. The more population grows, the more poverty will grow. Your health and education, that is the other issue with the other sectors which get affected by more population. You have so much of uneducation right now. And the figures that are given out, there's a lot to be, questioned there. As you introduced me as an ambassador, I also want to tell you I've been doing development consulting for a long while, and I go into the communities. And we were doing a monitoring and evaluation of the Benazir Income Support Program and asking women about literacy. Can anyone take a guess what the literacy rate was amongst women?
For the women?
Yeah.
5%?
3%. 3%. Can you believe that? And here we talk about
getting BISP. So among them, only 3% are educated.
Yes.
And what's
literate.
the definition of education?
Somebody who can write their name.
Write their name.
So what I'm saying is, let's open our eyes to this. It's never too late, and we need to focus on this. And I thought if I were kind of redoing this in a way, what I would say is, if it's a pyramid and your goal is to achieve national security, the foundation is really human security and internal security, and within that is population control. So that's really the basics of the basis. And then you can go up from there. It will automatically start improving. And it will take years. We take China as example. China started 30 years ago. And now, for the last few years, we have seen how it is benefiting. Before that, there were famines, there was poverty, there was, everything that could go wrong in a country went wrong.
Right.
So, but the way forward, if as I think about it, is that if we could focus on just these 3 or 4 things: population control, de-radicalization. We do not have adequate de-radicalization programs. In Sri Lanka, where I was posted last, they actually had special programs to what they call rehabilitate the Tamil cadres, because as you know, they fought a civil war for 29 years.
Right.
So they used to bring them into the formal setting, gave them employment. And what was very interesting, they put them into the performing arts. So on national days of Sri Lanka, you had all these women and men dancing on the stage, and who are they? They were the Tamil cadres. And now they were working, or they were helping the army to discover the mines that the Tamil cadres had actually planted in those areas. So we have to think out of the box. So what my suggestion is to think of non-traditional ways to address all your issues related to non-traditional and traditional. Think out of the box.
Right, but at the same time...
Can I just finish my 3 other... I was saying population control, de-radicalization, skill training, because we give a lot of education but not enough skills. Accountability mechanisms. Accountability mechanisms right from the grassroots. In India, they had a system called the Takhti system. The village used to have a Takhti, and the nambardar, whatever funds he was given, was written on that takhti कि भाई ये जो खर्चा है ये सड़क पे होना है, ये खर्चा जो है ये पानी पे होना है, etc. So if when the country starts getting looted by the top bosses, there's not much you can do. But when you build it up right from the bottom, it may just work. The last one is citizen-centric, and that is what the document also says, that it will be citizen-centric. What my take from that is, and I think Mr. Azaz also Ambassador Azaz mentioned it, that you go and have a public debate, which is fine. But at the same time, what is the citizen's duty? Have we defined in this, what am I as a citizen supposed to do? Whether it is to control my use of water, my control of energy, my use of other resources, what as a citizen can I do to work, how will I get that ownership, that this is my document, and what am I supposed to do for it? So I would look at citizen-centric from that perspective as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. This is very interesting actually, because the objective of national security policy is, or national security is the security of the citizen. Because just like in human rights we say, the basic human right is right to life. So if you are alive, if you have right to life, then your other rights come. So if there is citizen and he is secure, then national security, that national security can begin from there.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Habib Fazla and I'm representing the law department here. मेरे दो सवाल हैं, एक एम्बेसडर साहब से और एक डीआईजी साहब से. एम्बेसडर साहब से मेरा ये सवाल है कि जब भी पाकिस्तान के पास ऑप्शन हुआ है कि अपनी सोवरेनिटी और अमेरिका की सोवरेनिटी के दरमियान में ऑप्शन अगर उसके पास कभी भी हुआ है, तो उसने हमेशा अमेरिकन सोवरेनिटी को और उसके जो भी मिशंस हैं उनको पूरा करने के लिए अपनी सोवरेनिटी को हमेशा उसने सेकेंडरी पोजीशन पर ले गया. तो क्या अगर हमें, और अमेरिका ने कभी भी अपनी सोवरेनिटी को कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ नहीं किया पाकिस्तान के आगे, तो तो क्या ये फेयर नहीं होगा कि अगर पाकिस्तान के पास पाकिस्तान के पास अगर चाइना ब्लॉक में जाने का या अमेरिकन ब्लॉक में जाने का ऑप्शन हो, तो वो उसमें से चाइनीज़ ब्लॉक को चूज़ कर ले, क्योंकि क्योंकि चाइना जिस तरह की उसकी मार्केट बढ़ रही है, तो अमेरिकन ब्लॉक को छोड़ देने में तो ज़्यादा करीब चाइना की हुआ जा सकता है, जो हमारी अभी करंट सिचुएशन है उसके लिए. और दूसरा सवाल डीआईजी साहब से ये है कि जो आपने बात की पुलिस के हवाले से कि पुलिस को अपना काम जिस तरह भी, लेकिन सर हमें ये लगता नहीं कि पुलिस के पास अभी उतनी फैसिलिटीज़ नहीं है कि जितना हम उनसे एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं. ये मैं एक एसएसपी साहब से मैं उनका नाम लेना चाहता, लेकिन उनके वर्ड्स कोट कर रहा हूँ, एग्जैक्टली उनके वर्ड्स, कि हमारे पास फैसिलिटीज़ जो हैं वो कीनिया के मुल्क जैसी हैं और एक्सपेक्टेशंस हमारे से न्यूयॉर्क पुलिस डिपार्टमेंट वाली हैं, मतलब एग्जैक्टली उनके वर्ड्स से. तो क्या हमें लगता नहीं कि मोबाइल ट्रैफिक जी जो फंडामेंटल टेक्नोलॉजी है जैसे कि मोबाइल ट्रैकिंग सिस्टम्स और FIR सिस्टम वगैरह, ये अभी तक उतना अपडेट नहीं हो सका, तो क्या ये फैक्टर्स नहीं है जिनको पहले हमें देखना चाहिए?
देखिए, India is a much bigger country. We should never forget that. A much bigger economy and a much bigger country area-wise, population-wise. That is one aspect. The second is that it, right from the beginning, it has had its democratic processes in place. And therefore, when they took their decisions, the country was with them. They were non-aligned right from the beginning of the independence of India. Unfortunately, our imperatives, our security imperatives, Pakistan's security imperatives at that time was such that we had to become part of the CETO and the CENTO blocs. And we had to side with America. We were a smaller country, our army was not strong, and if you go into the history of how weapons and finances were divided between India and Pakistan, you will understand that we were left with a much poorer share of the resources than India had. And therefore it became a kind of, at that time, an existential threat. We were very new, very small. Kashmir was kept hanging by our colonial at that time, masters, and we were very vulnerable. So at that time, it was important that Pakistan chooses sides, and we chose America. However, over the last 70 years, now when you say, can we be non-aligned, it is certainly possible. Not that we've become bigger than India, but we have found our feet in the global world to a large extent with our policy, and therefore it is quite possible that we become non-aligned.
US interest versus Pakistan's interest in this relationship?
देखिए ये तो फिर this is really how we will call our shots, how we will define our national interest. If our national interest is that first and foremost we have to protect our sovereignty, yes, then we have to give up. When I say citizen-centric, that is also what I mean, that you and she and he and all of us should decide that yes, we will take this risk, we will not listen to what America has to say in the larger picture, but at the same time, we are living in a global world. We can't say that, okay, here's a big superpower and we don't want to have anything to do with them. That's not possible. This is not realpolitik, as they call it, and then you probably read it every day in your international relations.
The point is, we're going 110% of the way. Afghanistan's requirements now are कि ये बंदे बने, basically इंसान बने, right? That's what the Western and then release the funds. अभी half तो वो Biden कह रहा कर देगा, वो थोड़ा सा इंसान बने, थोड़ा सा खुदा का खौफ करें, and there is a natural affinity between both countries in the economic realm too. So on 110% of the way. Now Afghanistan also has to get its act together. There's only so much we can do before we end up appearing like a khuda na khasta, an occupation force, which is not our business. We're brotherly countries. So I think we've done plenty and now we need them. On energy, the issue with circular debt is very unique to Pakistan. It's like in the United States where it has everything going for it except healthcare. They somehow can't solve the healthcare issues. We somehow can't solve circular. And when I try to explain it to foreigners, they say, why don't you just fix that? So there's so much involved in it. But just so you know, when 1 watt of energy comes to your house, on the way, 30% is line loss, bad infrastructure, and 30% is the kunda. Somebody stole it from you. So it's half your badniyati, badanwani, and half of it is the old structure. So renewable energy targets, jo Madam Seema ne kaha tha, that is basically one way to do it. But it's such a wicked problem for political reasons that we really have to get it on the same board and say, solve it, and it can be solved. That is the one thing. On the geostrategic and geoeconomics, a very deep question. To be honest, we're still in the geostrategic mindset. We're just channeling a new phase, opening a dialogue, but we aren't there yet. Given our evolution over 75 years, the geostrategic and security imperatives were so great that we went hell-bent. We're not very good at managing multiple priorities. We say, this is what we do, and then we only work on that. So Zulfikar Ali Bhutto said, we will eat grass, but we will build this bomb. They're so hell. So then eat the grass. Just why would you? Now that they have the bomb, now they want to say, oh, but we also want a good economy. But you have marginalized so many well-wishers abroad, and you've done. So we also have to think, can we have all things on our terms in our fantasies and in reality?
Thank you so much. आपका जो पहला सवाल है कि नेक्टा भी मौजूद है, नेशनल एक्शन प्लान भी लाया गया, तो I think it did make a difference. Apart from the recent wave of terrorism जो कुछ अर्सा पहले शुरू हुई, ज़ाहिर है उसका ताल्लुक जियोपॉलिटिकल और सब ग्लोबल पॉलिटिक्स के साथ भी होता है, रीजनल पॉलिटिक्स के साथ भी ये वेव्स आती रहती हैं क्राइम की, टेररिज्म की. बट आफ्टर आई थिंक द इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ नेशनल एक्शन प्लान और नेक्टा हैज़ ऑल्सो बिन प्लेइंग इट्स रोल, बट देयर हैज़ बिन some legal hitches for the complete implementation of NACTA Act. But that issue is being, deliberated upon, and it will come to a conclusion. But apart from that, I think National Action Plan did a pretty good job. And you must have seen over the last 3-4 years how terrorism number of incidents has reduced substantially. Rather, I mean, we almost controlled it 90%. But obviously, this is an ongoing process. आपने दूसरी जो बात की कि पुलिस के पास पैसे नहीं हैं, obviously there we always have देखें जी, फाइनेंस का रिस्ट्रेंट सिर्फ पुलिस का ही नहीं है, पूरे पाकिस्तान का ही है, हर डिपार्टमेंट का है. पुलिस को मैं सिंगल आउट नहीं करूँगा. नेचुरली हमें मज़ीद रिसोर्सेज की ज़रूरत है, लेकिन we also realize that we are Pakistan police and not New York police. We should not expect that kind of resources, but let me assure you, a lot of resources have been improved in police over the last 10 years. काफ़ी इम्प्रूवमेंट चीज़ों में आई है. जैसे आपने रिफॉर्म्स का सवाल किया था, तो प्रोविंशियल लेवल पे बहुत सी कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग हुई है. But still much more needs to be done, and naturally it will take time.
Session here. I'm very thankful to all the audience and all the panelists as well. We had wide range of issues to cover, and I'm glad that we've been able to talk about most of the issues. Usman Saab covered the economic side, the geo-economics, and how Pakistan's economy is linked to national security. Seema Lai Baloch Sahaba focused on national, non-traditional elements of national security, and very rightly pointed out about the population bulge and also about the cultural aspect that can help us with national cohesion. Saqib Sultan Sahab talked about internal security and how internal security, the focus has been there, and it's also an ongoing process with the police reforms, and how police can actually support with regards to terrorism, crime control, organized crime. These are very important aspects. We could not cover the territorial integrity part. Shehzad Chaudhry Sahab was supposed to brief us on that, but then he had another event to go to. So we missed out on that. Azaz Chaudhry Sahab was with us. He covered the foreign affairs and the geopolitics of Pakistan, and if Pakistan can remain non-aligned in this world of camp politics and where superpowers are expecting us to take side. So these were the perspectives on national security, and the purpose of this debate was to evaluate the document, B, how there can be a future course. It's indeed a good initiative. It indeed is a novel idea where policy documents come, and we have something in front of us. हमारे पास सामने कोई ना कोई जो है वो चीज़ होती है हमारे डिपार्टमेंट्स के पास. कुछ ना होने से कुछ होना जो है वो बेहतर होता है, और हमारी नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के ऊपर कुछ ना कुछ डिबेट जो है वो ज़रूर होनी चाहिए ताकि हमें पता चले कि हमारी नेशनल सिक्योरिटी क्या है. और इन दिस एज ऑफ social media and relativity, there is less and less, there is more polarization, and there is less cohesion and there is less unity. तो वो जो चीज़ है कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर जब आपको चीज़ें पता नहीं होती तो उसके ऊपर डिबेट भी उतनी ज़्यादा पोलराइज्ड होती है. When you have something in front of you, then you can come, whether you can agree with it or you can disagree with it. So then there are two camps, right? So जब वो कोई चीज़ ही नहीं होती तो फिर there can be so many camps. So ये अच्छा है कि नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी का डॉक्यूमेंट है. इट इज़ नॉट अ लेंथी डॉक्यूमेंट, बट इट डज गिव अस एन आइडिया कि हमारे पॉलिसी मेकर्स, हमारी जो लीडरशिप है, हमारे जो पॉलिटिशियंस हैं, वो क्या सोचते हैं नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के बारे में. सो थैंक यू सो मच वंस अगेन फॉर जॉइनिंग अस ऑन दिस राउंड टेबल डिस्कशन, एंड आई थैंक यू ऑल on behalf of Center for Law and Security. So thank you so much.